The beam cracks under Ezra's hands. Willa catches it before it falls. They work until dark without speaking, because 3 years married, and they still don't know how to say what's breaking isn't just the barn. Listening on will show what happens when effort finally arrives, and finds the time it needed has already passed. The frontier does not allow room for uncertainty. Land must be worked, structures must stand, agreements must hold. Ezra married Willa to keep 2 failing homesteads alive. The terms were clear, the manners were kept, they shared meals, they shared labor, they did not share what mattered. After the storm, half the barn lies open to the sky. Repair cannot wait, and neither can the consequences of how they've lived beside each other. They rebuild without speaking. Each board set in place confirms what they have practiced for 3 years, that silence can feel orderly, even useful, until it becomes the marriage itself. This story will take from them the comfort of not naming what was lost. Staying with it means watching what happens when love finally has to pay for all the time it was avoided. Ezra counts fence posts at the east line and drives the last one crooked. Willa steadies the wire while he pulls it tight. They work in step because they always have. A wagon passes on the road with grain sacks tied high. Ezra watches it go, then turns back to the fence. Willa keeps her hands on the wire until it stops humming. Neither asks where the wagon is headed. The answer would require figures and dates. Those have learned not to surface. At noon, they eat from tins on the tailgate. She sets his bread where his hand will land. He pours water into her cup without looking. When the wind lifts dust across the field, they shift the tins and keep eating. The ledger sits on the seat between them. Ezra closes it with 2 fingers, not opening it. Willa notices and says nothing. The silence makes the meal shorter. In the afternoon, a neighbor rides over to ask about borrowing a plow. Ezra agrees before checking their own fields. Willa brings the plow from the shed and ties it down. She does not ask when it will come back. Near dusk, Ezra tests the gate and finds it dragging. He lifts it. Willa slips a stone under the hinge and steps back. The gate swings clean. "Thank you," he says. The word lands where a sentence could have been. She nods. The nod is practiced. It keeps the day intact. When the neighbor rides off with their plow, the field lies open behind him. Ezra watches the dust settle. Willa gathers the tools and puts them away. They have chosen again. Not to argue. Not to plan. Not to risk the order that keeps the land working. The gate holds, the ledger stays shut, and the cost takes its place, quiet and heavier than before. The sky turns early, flat and gray. Wind comes wrong from the west. Ezra moves the horses closer to the shed before noon. Willa brings in the loose boards stacked behind the barn and leans them against the wall. Neither says why they're hurrying. A cloud breaks open with rain that drives sideways. The barn roof rattles. Ezra climbs the ladder to the loft and throws a tarp across the grain sacks. Willa holds the ladder steady. Rain soaks her sleeves. He keeps his weight centered and does not look down. A beam groans. Ezra hears it before it slips. He shifts, too late to stop the crack that runs the length of the board. The sound is sharp, final. Willa tightens her grip on the ladder and waits. They work through the rain until the tarp is tied and the sacks are covered. When Ezra comes down, water runs from his hat brim onto the dirt. He sets the hat aside and tests the beam with his palm. It flexes. "We'll shore it," he says. It is the first plan spoken aloud in days. Willa nods once and brings the brace from the corner. They fit it into place without measuring. The rain eases, then returns harder. Mud gathers at their boots. By evening, a section of the roof sags where the beam split. It holds for now. Ezra counts the remaining boards and stops before finishing. Willa sees him stop. She hands him a nail and looks away. At supper, they eat standing. The table stays bare. The sound of rain fills the room and leaves no space for questions. After dark, Ezra steps outside to check the shed door. Willa stays inside and washes the mud from her hands. When he comes back, the lantern is already turned down. They have done what keeps the barn standing tonight. They have not said what happens if the weather holds. The brace holds. The silence does too. And with it, the cost climbs, measured now in hours they cannot get back. By morning, the rain has thinned, but the damage shows. Half the barn roof dips low enough to catch the light wrong. Ezra brings out the ladder and sets it where the ground is least soft. Willa carries boards from the stack and lines them in reach. He climbs. She stays below. This is how they've worked since the marriage. One above, one steadying. It keeps things orderly. Ezra pulls loose shingles free and lets them drop. They hit the dirt and split. Willa moves them aside with her boot and slides the next board forward. She does not look up unless he asks. He does not ask unless he must. A neighbor rides past and slows, taking in the roof. Ezra nods once and keeps working. The rider nods back and moves on. No offer is made. No explanation is required. By midday, the ladder sinks another inch. Ezra steps down to reset it. Willa brings a flat stone and sets it under the rung without being told. Their hands brush for a moment, then separate. The work continues. The board supply runs thin. Ezra counts again, this time aloud. He stops short of the number they need. Willa hears the pause more than the count. "We'll make it stretch," he says. She answers, "All right." It is not agreement. It is acknowledgement. They work until the light drops. One section of roof is secured, another is only patched, waiting for boards that are not there. Ezra ties it off as best he can. At night, they sit on opposite sides of the room. Willa mends a tear in her sleeve. Ezra sharpens a blade already sharp. The sounds do not meet. The barn stands, uneven and incomplete. The work has narrowed what can be done tomorrow. They have spent another day keeping collapse away, and the silence has taken more room, settling where questions might have gone. The wind returns before dawn and finds the weak place. Ezra hears it from the house, a low pull, then a crack that carries. He is on his feet before the sound finishes. Willa is already outside, shawl thrown on, hair unpinned. They meet at the barn without speaking. The patched section has given way. Boards hang loose. One beam has split clean through. Ezra drags the ladder into place. Willa brings the remaining boards and sets them down. There are fewer than yesterday. He climbs and tests the beam. It shifts. He braces it with his shoulder and calls for the hammer. She hands it up. Their timing is exact. It has been learned the long way. The wind pushes again. Ezra drives nails hard, faster than he should. One bends. He pulls it free and tries again. Below him, Willa holds the ladder steady and watches the ground, not him. A board slips from the stack and skids across the dirt. Willa steps on it to stop it moving. She looks at the roof, then at the remaining boards. "We don't have enough," she says. It is the first refusal of the day. Ezra stays where he is, shoulder pressed to the beam. "We can hold it." She does not move to fetch another board. The ladder creaks. The wind does not wait. Ezra finishes the line of nails and climbs down. The roof holds, barely. They stand there, hands empty, looking at what remains undone. By afternoon, rain starts again. They haul a tarp up and tie it down together. The knots are tight. The cover is thin. At night, they eat little. Ezra keeps his eyes on the table. Willa folds the cloth when they're done and sets it away. They have reached the edge of what effort can fix. Tomorrow will ask for more than work. Neither of them says what that more will be. Morning comes clear and cold, the rain spent. The tarp sags under pooled water. Ezra lifts one corner with a pole and lets it spill. The sound carries farther than it should. Willa brings out the bucket and scrubs mud from the step. She keeps at it after the wood is clean. Ezra watches, then turns back to the tarp. A rider appears on the road, slow, unhurried. Ezra sees him early. He lowers the pole and waits until the rider is close enough to wave. "Plenty of wind last night," the man says, looking at the roof. Ezra nods. It held. The rider waits. Willa stops scrubbing. She straightens and looks at Ezra, then at the rider. The pause stretches. "I've got spare boards," the man offers. "Could lend a few." Ezra's hand tightens on the pole. He does not look at Willa. "We'll manage." The rider shrugs and moves on. The dust settles again. Willa sets the bucket down hard enough that water sloshes over the rim. "We won't," she says. "It is not loud. It does not ask." Ezra turns then. The tarp flaps once, sharp. "It's enough for now." "For now," she repeats. She walks past him and into the barn. He follows. Inside, light falls through the broken section. Grain sacks are stacked tight beneath it. Willa presses her palm to one sack and feels the damp. She leaves her hand there. "If we lose this," she says, "we lose the field." Ezra nods once. He does not add the rest. The loan, the note, the days already gone. The words crowd his mouth and stay there. "I should have said something sooner." Willa looks at him then. The admission is small and late. She gives it the space it earns. "So should I." She moves her hand away. They carry the sacks deeper into the barn, farther from the light. It is slower work. It costs them time they do not have. The roof still sags. The neighbors' boards are already out of reach. They have spoken, finally, but not enough. And what they didn't say has begun to take shape, heavier than silence ever was. They rise before light and move grain again. Ezra lifts each sack as if weight might change its value. Willa sets them down in tighter rows, leaving a narrow path through the barn. The roof holds. It should not be trusted. Willa stops mid-stack and walks to the house. She returns with the small ledger kept by the door, the one for feed, not land. She opens it on a grain sack and runs her finger down the line. Ezra watches from where he stands. "If we sell the bay," she says, "we make it through winter." The words arrive before he's ready for them. Ezra's hands stay on the sack he's holding. The bay is in the field behind them. She shifts her weight and flicks an ear as if she knows she's being discussed. She pulls the plow. So do the others. Willa doesn't look at the horse. The choice sits between them, solid and unkind. Sell now and lose strength later. Keep her and risk losing both. Ezra sets the sack down and wipes his hands on his trousers. The motion is careful, unnecessary. Not today. Willa closes the ledger. The sound is louder than it should be. She walks back to the barn and gathers tools that do not need gathering. In the afternoon, the wind rises again. The tarp lifts at one corner and snaps. Ezra nails it down with the last straight nail. The roof creaks and settles. At dusk, they stand at the gate together. The bae lowers her head and breathes into the dirt. Ezra rests his hand on her neck, then removes it. They have chosen delay again. The choice protects what they know how to keep. And when the light goes, the road stays empty, carrying with it the hour they did not use and will not get back. The third day of work begins without weather to blame. The sky is clear. The barn still leans. Ezra sets the ladder again and climbs to the split beam. He tests it with his shoulder. It answers with a dull shift. Willa brings up the brace and waits, holding it in place. He does not signal. They work longer than they should. By midday, Ezra's hands shake when he drives the nails. One misses and tears the wood. He pulls it free and turns it over, as if the other side might forgive the damage. Willa sees the tear and steps back. That won't hold. It will. Ezra drives the nail again. The beam tightens, then cracks farther down. They stop at the same time. Ezra climbs down. He stands close enough that she has to shift her weight to keep space between them. The closeness is practical. It feels like something else only because they have avoided it so long. "We should ask for help," she says. The words are plain. They arrive late. Ezra looks past her at the open door. "If we do, they'll see the rest. The rest is already here." He nods. The nod is heavier than refusal. "Tomorrow. Let me finish this first." She does not hand him the brace. The refusal is small. It changes the room. Ezra waits, then reaches for it himself. His hand closes around wood she has not released. For a moment they both hold it. Then she lets go. By evening, the beam is held by wood that should have been replaced. The barn stands because it has not yet fallen. At supper, Ezra clears his throat twice and says nothing. Willa folds her hands and waits longer than before. They have reached the point where asking costs less than silence. And still, the silence is chosen. Night comes clean and untroubled. The chance they passed does not return with it. Ezra leaves before Willa finishes tying her boots. He takes the road at a steady pace, not the shortcut across the field. The choice is visible. By the time he returns, the sun is high and the barn has not changed. Willa is inside, shifting tools that do not need shifting. She hears the horse before she sees him and straightens once, then does not move. Ezra brings no boards back with him. He ties the mare and stands a moment with his hand on the post. "They're busy. Harvest coming on." Willa nods. She does not ask who he spoke to. The answer would spread. They go back to the beam. Ezra lifts the brace again. Willa sets the ladder and steps away. He climbs, slower now. The wood answers him with a sound that is not new. The brace slips. Ezra catches it and holds. His shoulder takes the weight. "Hold the ladder," he says. She does. Her hands are steady. The ladder is not. "Lower it," she says. "Just a minute." He drives a nail. It bends. He pulls it free. His hand shakes. "Ezra." It is the first time she has used his name in weeks. He stops. The pause opens something neither of them prepared for. He looks down at her, then away, then down again. "If this falls," she says, "it won't matter who saw." He lowers the brace and climbs down. They stand in the dust. The space between them is smaller than it's been in months. Neither moves to close it. By afternoon, they move the last sacks out from under the weak place. The barn empties into the open. The field takes what the roof cannot hold. At dusk, Ezra sets the ladder aside. "Tomorrow." It sounds different now. Willa nods once. The nod does not protect anything. They have chosen to stop pretending the work is enough. What comes next will cost them standing, or pride, or time they no longer own. The barn waits. The road does too. They walk to the neighbor's place together this time. The road is dry. There is no reason to hurry, and none to turn back. Ezra carries the list of boards in his pocket and does not take it out. Willa keeps her eyes on the fence line as they pass it. The distance feels longer than it is. The neighbor meets them at the gate. He looks at Willa first this time, then at Ezra. "Heard the roof went," he says. "It hasn't," Ezra answers. The correction is reflexive. It sounds thin. The neighbor waits. Willa steps forward. "It will, if we don't replace the beam." The man nods once and gestures them inside. He does not ask why they waited. They load boards onto the wagon. Ezra counts them out loud and stops when the number is right. The neighbor names a price. It is fair. It is not kind. Ezra reaches for his wallet and finds less than he expected. He hesitates. The neighbor watches and says nothing. Willa takes the ledger from her coat and opens it to the feed page. She runs her finger down the line and stops. "We can pay half now, the rest after harvest." The neighbor considers, then nods. "All right." On the walk back, the boards creak with each step. Ezra keeps his hand on the rope. Willa walks beside him, close enough to feel the pull. At the barn, they stack the boards against the wall. The roof sags above them, unchanged. The work ahead is clear. Ezra exhales and looks at her. "I should have come sooner." Willa answers without heat. "We both should have." They stand there. The admission hanging between them, complete and insufficient. They have paid with credit they cannot spare. They have spoken what cannot be taken back. The boards are enough to fix the roof. They are not enough to recover the time they spent protecting silence instead. They start before sunrise. Ezra sets the ladder. Willa lays out the boards in order, shortest to longest. The plan is clear. It has taken too long to arrive. Ezra climbs and pulls the split beam free in sections. Each piece comes down heavier than it should. Willa carries them out and stacks them away from the barn. She does not look back at the gap left behind. The new beam goes up slow. Ezra braces it while Willa holds the ladder and counts under her breath. Not numbers, just time. When the beam settles, it sits true. The sound is different. It holds without argument. They work through the morning without stopping. Nails driven clean. Boards seated flat. The roof closes itself piece by piece. Near noon, Ezra misses a step coming down. He catches himself on the ladder rung and steadies. Willa reaches out, then stops, her hand suspended. She lowers it again. The moment passes. Neither names it. By afternoon, the work is done. The tarp comes down. Light no longer cuts through the roof. The barn looks ordinary again. Ezra stands with his hands on his hips and says nothing. Willa gathers the tools and returns them to their places. The order is restored. At supper, Ezra clears his throat. "It's fixed." He says it as if stating a fact might be enough. Willa nods. "Yes." They eat in the quiet they know best. The table holds, the house holds. They have saved the barn. They have not saved the distance that grew while they worked around it. The roof is sound, the land is safe, for now, and the silence, no longer necessary, remains. The next morning brings ordinary work. Ezra mends a hinge on the west gate. Willa measures seed for the back field. The barn stands whole behind them, finished and unremarkable. A rider stops at the fence and asks about the roof. Ezra answers that it's fixed. The man nods and rides on. The exchange costs nothing now. It should have cost something earlier. At noon, Willa brings the ledger to the table and opens it without ceremony. She marks the payment made, then the space left blank for what is owed. The line is clean, the gap is not. Ezra watches her write. "We'll manage." The phrase returns easily. She closes the book. "We will." She stands. The agreement is practical. It does not reach further. In the afternoon, Ezra leads the bay to water. She drinks and lifts her head, calm. He rests his hand on her neck longer than needed, then lets it fall. Willa sees and turns back to the seed. Near dusk, they carry chairs outside and sit where the light lasts. The field is quiet. The house holds the day's heat. There is room to speak. Ezra opens his mouth once and stops. Willa waits. The dust on his hands catches the low sun. His jaw tightens, then releases. She sees his breath change. Shallow first, then deeper. He shifts his weight forward. The chair creaks. The moment stretches, taut and breakable. Then he looks away. Willa does not move. She watches the light pull itself across the field, slow and unforgiving. Her hands rest in her lap. Her fingers curve inward. Not quite folding. She waits longer than anyone should have to wait. The field darkens. A bird calls once from the fence line and stops. Then she turns her head, and the moment dies. When the light goes, they carry the chairs in. Willa sets them where they belong. Ezra checks the latch and turns it. The barn is repaired. The debt is named. The chance to change how they live beside each other has narrowed to a habit. They will keep the land. They will keep the order that made it possible. And what that order has taken, dignity, timing, the chance that effort might have mattered sooner, will remain unpaid, steady as the roof above them. Winter comes early to the low ground. Ezra sets the trap lines along the creek and checks them at first light. Willa salts meat in the shed and hangs it where the air stays cold. The work is clean. It does not argue. At midday, the neighbor rides over with a receipt for the boards. Ezra signs and hands it back. The paper is folded and put away. The exchange ends where it begins. Inside, Willa lays out the accounts for winter feed and seed. Ezra looks once and nods. He does not sit. She does not ask him to. The bay pulls the plow across the back field. The furrows hold. Ezra watches the line straighten and keeps it that way. Willa gathers the last of the seed and closes the sack. There is no extra. There is enough. Near evening, Ezra stops at the barn door and checks the beam. It answers solid. He stays there a moment longer than required. Willa passes behind him with an armful of kindling. She pauses, then steps around and goes on. At supper, the lamp is turned down. Ezra thanks her for the meal. Willa answers with a nod that has learned its weight. They eat. The sound of cutlery fills the space and keeps it. After, Ezra reaches for the ledger and sets it back where it was. Willa folds the cloth and puts it away. The table clears. He sets her cup down, and this time, closer than usual. She notices. She does not move it. He does not look at her. She does not look away. It is not forgiveness. It is not resolution. It is recognition. They have kept the land. They have paid what could be paid. What remains cannot be accounted for. The time they protected order when honesty might have changed the shape of things, the dignity lost in waiting, the effort that arrived after its hour had passed. The roof holds through the night. So does the silence. And by morning, it is no longer something they endure. It is the way they live. If you love stories like this, you're welcome here. Subscribe if you want more Western romances. And if this story stayed with you, you can say so in the comments. I'll see it. I'm your narrator, John. Until the next road.